Well, for more on this, let's bring in Dr. William Booth, who's a lecturer in Latin American history at the UCL Institute of the Americas. Thank you very much for being with us here on France 24 today. We've just had it confirmed. Sheinbaum has won a landslide victory. Is that what you were expecting?
Yes, all the polls indicated a lead of around 20% for her. It's actually going to be higher than that. It looks like she's going to have almost 60% of the vote, and her nearest competitors on 30%. So it is a landslide, yes.
And what was it that galvanised so much support for Claudia Sheinbaum?
Two things, I think. One thing is that despite a huge public, well-funded and well-connected campaign saying that AMLO was a tyrant and so on, regardless of the way that he conducted himself as president, he's been very popular. And so the party, the Morena party that Claudia Sheinbaum has been standing for, has also reflected that popularity, and that's something that's very important in this vote. The other thing is that she's seen as a competent candidate. She's seen as a candidate of hope. And I think people have embraced the fact that Mexico are electing their first female president, despite some of the rather nasty words that have been thrown at her by opponents, including some anti-Semitism and misogyny from former presidents.
And Mexican political culture has historically been, I think it's fair to say, rather macho. Would you say that this is a significant turning point? Because, of course, the woman who came second to Claudia Sheinbaum was also a woman.
Yeah, I mean, it's the culmination of a longer process, I think, rather than something that's come out of the blue. So that there have been changes in electoral law that have tried to make this more concrete in 2019 regarding parity in the legislature, but there's been a long and proud tradition of women's political movement, activism, campaigning in Mexico. So I think it's not something that's come out of the blue.
Now, Xóchitl Gálvez has not yet officially conceded defeat. Do we have any indication of why that might be? Is there anything to read into that?
Well, there were some indications that this might happen before, because there were already complaints being made by the opposition about electoral irregularities. That was a bit predictable. I think there's obviously been lots of mess around this enormous electoral event. It's a huge exercise in democracy, and it's not kind of perfect. But there's no real indications of any significant scale vote rigging or anything like that. There are lots of small instances of cartels getting involved in trying to buy votes, but that's not something that has particularly benefited one party from as far as I can see.
Now, you mentioned the cartels just there. These elections have been mired in violence, including 2 deaths on Sunday during voting. What is Sheinbaum's plan for the cartels that have been and continue to wreak havoc in Mexico?
Well, it seems so far, broadly speaking, to be a two-pronged policy that's following on from what AMLO has done. So one is a kind of general approach, which is to not launch all-out war on the cartels, as has been tried by previous presidents, but rather to pursue social change, which will make joining cartels less attractive or less of a fait accompli for a lot of the population. The other part is to continue to use the army to take part in this conflict, and to use to militarize the National Guard rather than using the regular police force, which has not been very effective historically in the fight against the cartels.
And what would you say are the other major challenges facing Sheinbaum when she takes office?
Well, one thing that we're still waiting for, of course, is the congressional results. By the look of it, it doesn't look like Morena will achieve a supermajority and therefore be able to make easy constitutional changes. But I think something that's also unclear in the next few weeks and months is how much this opposition will hold together, or whether it was just a confection made for this particular election. Because if the PRI and the PAN don't hold together, then Morena might start to draw support from other parts of the political spectrum. We actually saw some very late defections from the PRI to Morena in the run-up to the election. So I think there's going to be a lot shaking out over summer before Sheinbaum officially becomes president later in the year.
Now, Sheinbaum's election does come amid a deepening migration crisis at the Mexico-US border. Do we have any indications at this point of how Mexico's relationship with Washington is likely to change, if at all, under Sheinbaum?
I don't think there'll be a dramatic change. It might depend on who becomes the next president of the United States. But AMLO, the previous president, worked perfectly well with both Trump and Biden on migration, not necessarily to the benefit of migrants, it has to be said. But that was an area in which Mexico and the United States were able to work in concert.
Dr. William Booth, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Dr. William Booth, lecturer in Latin American history at the UCL Institute of the Americas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.